Imagine a kingdom hidden high up in the mountains, so high that the air is cold and the clouds touch the ground. This place was known as the Roof of Africa, a land called Ethiopia. While almost every other country around it was being taken over by giant empires from across the sea, this one kingdom stood alone like a fortress. And the person who kept the doors locked and the people safe wasn't just a king, it was a woman who was smarter, richer, and more defiant than almost anyone in history. Her name was Taytul Betul. She wasn't born into a royal family, but she grew up to become the most powerful person in her land. She was a woman who understood that gold and brains were just as important as swords and shields. Even though her name is not in every history book today, her secret power is the reason her country stayed free while others fell. You might have heard of famous generals who led huge armies into battle, but Taytul was different. She was the brain behind the plan. She was the one who looked at the maps, the one who managed the kingdom's secret fortune, and the one who had the courage to say no when the rest of the world expected her to bow down. But how did a girl from the mountains become an empress who made the biggest leaders in Europe shake with fear? And why is her story a hidden treasure that the world is only now beginning to uncover? To understand the mystery of her power, you first have to look at the land she protected. Ethiopia was a place of endless riches, filled with green valleys, deep mines, and ancient traditions. Taytul was the master of these resources. She knew that if her people were wealthy and strong, no one could ever treat them like they were small or weak. She was the true force behind the throne, and she was about to show the world that an empress with a fortune and a plan is the most dangerous thing an invading army could ever face.
Taytul didn't just wait for power to come to her. She built it from the ground up using the wealth of the land. In Ethiopia, gold was more than just a shiny metal. It was a shield that could protect a nation. Just like the ancient queens who came before her, Taytul understood that a kingdom without money is a kingdom that can be easily pushed around. She spent her days organizing the resources of the empire, making sure that every gold mine and every trading path was working to make her people stronger. She was a master of details. While others were thinking about fancy parties, Taytul was thinking about factories and food. She knew that to stay free, her country needed to be able to make its own things. She encouraged the building of new towns and the creation of workshops where people could make tools and weapons. She was like a conductor of a massive orchestra where every worker and every miner played a part in making the kingdom's fortune grow. This wealth wasn't just for show. Taytul used her secret fortune to create a web of power that stretched across the mountains. She knew that in a world where bigger empires were looking for new land to take, having a full treasury was the best way to keep them at a distance. She made sure her capital was a place of luxury, but also a place of business. The most amazing part was how she used this money to gain influence. In the royal court, Taytul wasn't just a wife or a figure in the background. Because she controlled the resources, she was often the person who decided which projects would happen and which would not. She was a woman who could say yes to a new road or no to a bad deal, and everyone, from the local leaders to the foreign visitors, knew that her word was final. She was building a foundation that was just as solid as the stone pyramids of old. By the time the rest of the world realized how powerful she had become, Taytul had already turned her kingdom into a hidden industrial engine. But soon, that strength would be tested. A hungry superpower from across the sea was looking toward the mountains of Ethiopia, and they were bringing demands that would force the empress to make the most dangerous choice of her life.
While Taytul was busy making her kingdom strong, a shadow was growing over the map of the world.
Across the blue waters of the sea, the leaders of Europe were looking at Africa like it was a giant puzzle, and they wanted to take all the pieces for themselves. One country in particular, called Italy, was very hungry for power. They had already taken control of lands near the coast, but their eyes were fixed on the green mountains and the hidden gold of Ethiopia. The Italians didn't start with a war. They started with a piece of paper. They sent messengers to the mountains with a special deal called a treaty. On the outside, it looked like a simple promise of friendship and trade, but Taytul was too smart to be fooled by nice words. She knew that sometimes a piece of paper can be more dangerous than 1,000 spears. She spent long nights looking at every single word in that treaty. While the men in the court were ready to sign it and be done, Taytul noticed something strange. The version of the treaty written in the Italian language said one thing, but the version written in the Ethiopian language said something completely different. It was a secret trap. If they signed it, Ethiopia would no longer be a free country. It would belong to Italy, and the empress would have to ask for permission just to rule her own people. When she realized what they were trying to do, Taytul didn't just get angry, she became afire. She stood up in the middle of the royal court and told everyone the truth about the hidden trap. She knew that if they gave in even a little bit, the Italians would take everything. They wanted to treat her home like a small, weak territory that they could bully and tax. But they didn't realize that they weren't dealing with a weak ruler. They were dealing with a woman who had a secret fortune and a mountain of courage. The Italian messengers tried to act tough. They made demands and talked about how big and famous their army was. They thought that a queen from the mountains would be scared of their shiny uniforms and their modern guns. But Taytul looked them right in the eye and gave them a simple answer. She said, "No." It was a no that echoed through the halls of the palace and across the valleys. She told them that her country would rather fight until the very last person than be a servant to a foreign empire. With that one word, the Lion Queen had declared a secret war of her own, and the world was about to see what happens when an empress decides to strike back.
Once the word no had been spoken, everything changed. Taytul knew that the Italians wouldn't just go home and forget about the mountains. She knew that a no to a superpower meant that war was coming, and she wasn't going to wait around for the enemy to show up at her door. This was the moment she made a brave and shocking decision. She wouldn't just be a queen sitting on a gold throne, she would become a general. Taytul began to use her secret fortune in a way no one expected. She knew that a hungry army is a weak army, so she organized thousands of women and men to gather food and supplies. She made sure there were enough grains, meat, and water to feed a massive force for months. She was like a master builder, putting together a giant machine made of people. While the Italian generals were planning how to march, Taytul was already 10 steps ahead of them, making sure her soldiers had everything they needed to survive the cold mountain nights. But she didn't stop at just food. She used her wealth to buy the best tools for the job. She made sure her army had modern weapons that could stand up to the ones from Europe. She was often seen wearing heavy, grand armor and carrying her own weapons, showing everyone that she was ready to stand in the front lines. She wasn't just telling people to fight, she was showing them that she was a fierce warrior who wasn't afraid of anything. As the drums of war began to beat, the people of the mountains saw their empress in a new light. They saw a woman who was a politician, a planner, and a soldier all at once. She told her troops that they weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for their right to be free and independent. The Italians thought they were going to fight a simple army of farmers, but they were actually walking into a trap set by the smartest mind in Africa. Taytul led her army through the steep paths and narrow valleys, moving like a shadow in the mountains. She knew the land better than anyone, and she used it as her biggest weapon. The stage was set for a massive clash that would shake the entire world, and the Empress was standing right at the center of it all, ready to prove that her defiance was a force that couldn't be stopped. The moment of truth arrived in a place called Adwa. The Italian army marched into the mountains, feeling very sure of themselves. They had big cannons, shiny uniforms, and generals who had won many battles in other parts of the world. They expected the Ethiopian army to see their power and run away in fear. But they didn't know that the Empress had a plan that was more powerful than any cannon. Taytul wasn't just watching from a distance. She was right there in the middle of the action, and she noticed something the men had missed. She saw that the Italian soldiers were camping near a very important water source. She knew that without water, even the strongest soldier becomes weak. So she made a daring move. She led her own special group of soldiers to cut off the water supply to the Italian camp. It was a brilliant, aggressive move that showed she was a master of military strategy. The battle was loud and terrifying. The air was filled with the sound of drums and the smoke from guns. The Empress stayed calm, moving her troops like pieces on a chessboard. She encouraged her soldiers, telling them to remember that they were protecting their families and their gold-filled land. Because of her careful planning, the Ethiopian army was able to surround the invaders. The Italians, who thought they were the masters of the world, were caught completely by surprise. In the heat of the fight, Taytul showed no mercy to the idea of being conquered. She pushed her soldiers forward, and her presence on the field made them fight harder than they ever had before. The Italian lines began to break. The hungry superpower was being defeated by the very people they had tried to bully. It was an astonishing moment in history. An African army, led by a brilliant woman, was crushing one of the most famous militaries in Europe. As the sun began to set over the mountains, the ground was covered in the signs of a massive victory. The invaders were forced to retreat, leaving behind their flags and their pride. Taytul had proven that she was not just a queen, but a fierce general who knew how to win. Her no had turned into a victory that would echo across every continent. But the war wasn't over just because the shooting had stopped. Now the Empress had to use her brains to make sure the peace was just as strong as the victory. After the big victory in the mountains, the world was in shock. No one expected a queen from Africa to defeat a powerful army from Europe. But Taytul knew that winning a battle was only half the job. She knew that the hungry superpower would try to use tricky words again to get what they wanted. So she prepared for a different kind of fight, a fight using pens and paper. This was where she would show that her mind was her most powerful secret weapon. The Italians were tired and embarrassed. They sent their messengers back to the palace, but this time they weren't acting tough or making demands. They wanted to sign a peace treaty. Taytul, the clever leader who had already spotted their traps before, was ready for them. She didn't just want the fighting to stop. She wanted a promise that would last forever. She used her position of strength to make sure the new treaty was a pact between equals, not a surrender. She sat across from the famous generals and diplomats, and she didn't blink. She insisted that Italy must officially recognize that her country was completely free and independent. She made sure there were no hidden meanings or double talk this time. Because of her fierce determination, the Italian Empire was forced to do something they almost never did. They signed a paper that said they had no power over her land. This negotiation was a remarkable victory. It wasn't just a win for her kingdom, it was a win for the entire continent. By standing her ground, Taytul secured her country's freedom for many years to come. While other nations were being divided and taken over, her home stayed proud and independent, protected by the no she had spoken and the victory she had won on the field. The broken dreams of the invaders became a trophy for her people, a silent reminder that they were an absolute power that could not be bullied. The Empress had protected her wealth, her crown, and the future of her children. She had shown the world that a woman with a plan and a fortune could change the map of history. But as the years went by, a new kind of silence began to grow around her story, and the Lion Queen was slowly tucked away into the shadows of the past.
Even though the Empress had won the war and saved her country, the world around her began to change. Just like the great empires of the past, the kingdom faced new challenges that didn't come from soldiers, but from the slow passing of time. The gold and the riches that had fueled her power were still there, but the story of the woman who used them to defeat a superpower started to fade. For a long time, it seemed like history wanted to forget the warrior queen who had the courage to say no. Her end didn't come from a battle or a defeat. Instead, it was a quiet transition as the leadership of the country moved to a new generation. But even as she stepped into the shadows, the legacy she left behind was as permanent as a mountain. Because of Taytul, her country remained a place of genuine African innovation and pride. She had stamped her unique style on everything she did, from the way she managed the money to the way she led her troops into the smoke of war. So, why is the story of the richest and fiercest empress in Africa a secret that history barely tells? For many years, her tale was surrounded by silence, overshadowed by the stories of leaders from other parts of the world. But today, that silence is finally breaking. People are beginning to realize that the freedom of an entire continent was once held in the hands of a woman who refused to be a servant to anyone. The memory of Betul stands as proof of a brilliant and fiercely independent African power. She proved that a woman could be a master of business, a genius at planning, and a hero on the battlefield all at once. Her victory wasn't just about winning a fight, it was a victory for the idea that every nation has the right to be free. Today, when we look back at the roof of Africa, we don't just see mountains, we see the spirit of a queen who protected her wealth and her crown against the greatest odds. She was the absolute power in the land of gold, a general who suffered no fools and feared no empire. Her incredible story demands to be heard because it reminds us that one person with enough courage can change the destiny of the world forever. The memory of Betul stands as proof of a brilliant and fiercely independent African power. She proved that a woman could be a master of business, a genius at planning, and a hero on the battlefield all at once. Her victory wasn't just about winning a fight, it was a victory for the idea that every nation has the right to be free. Her incredible story demands to be heard because it reminds us that one person with enough courage can change the destiny of the world forever. But this raises some big questions that we need to think about. Why do you think the history books we read in school left out the story of the richest and most powerful empress in Africa? Is there a reason her power was kept a secret? If Betul hadn't stood her ground and said no to that treaty, do you think Africa would look different today? We really want to know what you think about her strategy. Which part of her plan impressed you more? The way she used her secret fortune to build the army, or the way she cut off the water supply to win the battle? Let us know your favorite moment in the comments below. And while you are there, tell us who we should look into next. The warrior queen was a hero who protected her land, but is there another forgotten leader from history you want us to investigate? Drop their name below and let's keep the conversation going. If you found the story of the warrior queen as incredible as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By joining us, you help us break the silence and bring more of these forgotten African legends back to light. Don't let these secrets stay buried. Share this video so the whole world can hear the name of the woman who said no.